We are the keepers of our future and our past, and the names of our heroes past and gone, on whose courage, strength, and wisdom the Northshield stands. Teach their stories to your children, to our
Greetings, Northshield and friends. I am here with Master Ealdred of Malmesbury, and I am your host, Thora Hrafnsteinn Ornolfsdottir, and this is Griffin Tales. Ealdred, how are you doing?
Well, how are you today, Thora?
I'm all right. Doing pretty good.
Good.
How was your journey to this interview tent? Good?
It was without distraction and without excitement. And sometimes that's a good journey when there's no excitement.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, it's good to see you here in one piece for sure. So we're all fascinated by you. I can guarantee you. And that's why we're here, is to kind of pick your brain and see who you are. So we have some questions, and because I have traveled the planet long enough, I'm going to need some helpers to remember what they are.
Sacred crystals of vision.
Yes,
Ooh.
Absolutely. So
I have my crystals of vision on as well.
They are helpful.
Yeah.
So you live in the middle of South Dakota in the mundane world. What does the kingdom look like from your vantage point there?
The kingdom is in many ways far, far away. I have had the advantage that right off the start, I got involved with the Moneyers Guild and traveled a lot. I think I counted it up once. I had been to 5 kingdom level events before I went to my first Shire event. Partly just because the Shire only had one event a year. And I think the first time they had one, I was involved with something with family matters. But so for me, I've always been more a member of the kingdom than I have of Calder and Hale in particular, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
I think, though, for a lot of people here in Calder and Hale and my friends farther out west in Shattentor and No Regard, the kingdom is something that's far, far away. Fortunately, most royals come out at least once during summer events, so we have court. But yeah, for a lot of people, kingdom's just kind of this nebulous thing they hear about.
Mm-hmm. Sure, yeah. So you've played quite a lot at a kingdom level. You've been Kingdom Seneschal. I know that you can't talk a lot about all the details there, but do you have any stories you can tell us about your time as Kingdom Seneschal?
Been thinking about that, and nothing super humorous comes to mind.
So it's not a funny job?
It has its moments. I remember one of my predecessors, Mistress Catriona, saying to me after a particularly grueling event, "You've really had a tough first year as Seneschal." And I said, "It's only been 11 months. And her and Master Bard about fell over laughing. I guess because I had to make the distinction. I still got a month to go before I hit a year. But, the upside is, in some ways, this is a sad story, but it really is, to me, was uplifting. Under my watch, there was a couple shires that just couldn't make it anymore. Mostly in rural areas, and they had to close. And I remember meeting with the people that had been part of it, and the love they had for the SCA and the efforts they had put into trying to keep them open. I wish I had thought to look up their SCA names, but Holly and John Salazar, who live in the Upper Peninsula.
Yeah. Yeah, good people. Yeah.
They are. And and I still remember one of my better moments as seneschal is when I just looked him in the eye and said, and I believe there was maybe another shire. I remember I said, "You all have done good work, and you have really struggled hard, and I just want to say thank you very much. And it's okay to be sad at this." And tears came to their eyes. And something similar when we closed Rudavale. And again, I just kick myself that their names escape me right now. I can picture talking to them. And, it's seeing that kind of love for the game or the dream or however you want to portray it. That was probably the best part of being seneschal, is for all that. In some ways, we're very medieval, just like the knights had this tremendously high code of chivalry that they aspired to and often did not attain. I think sometimes in the SCA, we aspire to this great level and we don't always make it, but there are so many people really giving their all to make it a beautiful retreat from the world, if you will, retreat from the mundane. That's what's really inspiring to me. That was probably the best part of being Kingdom Seneschal, was seeing those folks and having a chance to work with them and sometimes in small ways being able to help them.
That's cool. That's I've heard similar from royalty.
Yeah.
As far as that. Yeah. Well, awesome.
I did find myself quoting quite often I don't know who originated the saying. I got it from Robert Heinlein. Was, if you like the law and sausage, don't watch either one being made. And there's a fair amount of sausage making that goes on when you're the Kingdom Seneschal or when you're royals. That, I think my successor, Eleanor, once referred to us as we were like swans. We endeavored to look really graceful and serene on the surface, but underneath our little feet were going really quick, trying to keep up. So.
That's funny. Oh, wow. Yeah, I think there's a certain type of person who's cut out for that job, and I'm not that person. So I've always been kind of in awe of people who can take something like that on. Chamberlains too. I don't know how they do it. I really don't. But it's awesome. It's awesome that the kingdom and the world has people like you guys, for sure. Like you folks.
Thank you.
So what was it like to serve on a significant kingdom level when coming from a place where there's little direct kingdom oversight?
I think for me, just because I have been so kingdom oriented, I had served as a chamberlain to Their Majesties Kutsu and Athelflaed in was that 2014 and 15. And that really helped prepare me, I think, because I got to see a lot more of the behind the scenes stuff, got to see how their interactions with the Kingdom Seneschal, those kind of things. So for me, it was a pretty natural progression. I'd been regional seneschal under my predecessor, Lord Einstein, and I'm mangling his name just a little bit. And he was a good person to work with. And so I think for me, it wasn't a big jump. I think if for someone who really hasn't done a lot of kingdom stuff, they would really need, I think, to work at a regional level first. Whether it's just on their own by traveling to all the events and the other shires, or serving at some kind of regional level, regional marshal, regional ANS minister, regional seneschal. I think that would be a good first step.
So if somebody is a kingdom officer and they're coming from a place that far away from kind of the, hub of things, well, I guess just asking you personally, did you feel stretched, or did you feel like you were able to be in both places, present to both things?
When you serve as a kingdom level officer, and probably even as a regional, depending on what kind of activity it is, you really just become, you don't really have any responsibility. You shouldn't have any responsibilities locally, because your time, you really can't give it the good time. I mean, you're not actually allowed to be a local officer when you're Kingdom Seneschal. I'm
Right.
pretty sure that's true for all the other kingdom positions. So in some ways it was nice. I just came to my shire meetings and just relaxed and didn't have any responsibilities. Big problem for me was keeping my mouth shut and not being a Budinsky. And part of that was, though, that helped develop local leadership. I was seneschal
Oh,
for
sure. Yeah.
3 or 4 years. Started being seneschal literally. We had a meeting. I had become seneschal. No, we had the meeting where I was elected seneschal was the meeting where we were going to decide whether or not to close the shire. And we had 3 new people show up because we had just done a demo. So I became seneschal and we kept going.
That's cool.
So, but if you're coming from a small group that really relies on you, it could be tough to be a kingdom officer. If that
Sure.
makes, if you're in Yara or Nordskogen or Cam, maybe not as big a deal because there's lots of people there to help pick up the slack.
Right. Well, did you get any support from your local group when you were Kingdom Seneschal?
Yeah, very much so.
Okay.
I mean, they were, of course, my friend Berenice, I think she was Seneschal while I was Kingdom Seneschal. And of course, we're good buddies, good traveling buddies. And she very much tried to have the Shire help me as needed. So yeah, I definitely felt supported locally.
Cool. So what inspires you to do service on that level, or any service? What inspires you to do service?
It almost sounds like a cop-out, but in many ways, I'm wired to be involved. I'm a joiner and a participant, a supporter of the cause. Sometimes that's really worked to my disadvantage in life. But with the SCA, I really saw it as something that, to be honest, met some of my needs. I mean, early on, I think I've told you this story personally, my wife made the comment, you're more yourself when you come home from your SCA weekends. And for many ways, the SCA was kind of that home I'd been looking for, kind of a cultural, nerdy home that I wanted. And so because of that, it was very easy for me to want to help perpetuate it, whether it was locally. But, I was part of the SCA I joined, my first event was in 2007. I think the first office I held was maybe Exchequer, and that was like 2011, maybe 12. So, for the first 4 or 5 years, I really didn't serve as an officer. But I think I just kind of got to the point I started seeing the need. And I think once I became local seneschal and saw the need, that's kind of what primed the pump for other things.
Well, speaking of other things, there's this thing called the Moneyers Guild. And I hear that you were mainly or partially responsible for that.
Yes, ma'am. Before we go there, though, if I can just say one other thing about kingdom versus local.
Mm-hmm.
I really encourage people from small, out of the way shires to try to serve at a kingdom level. And at the risk of angering some people, in Northshield, there's kind of that, I call it the I-94 corridor between Nordskogen and Yara Vettler. And probably half the kingdom's population lives on either end of that little corridor. It's a very different world going to a baronial meeting where there's 15, 20, 30, 40 people versus going to a local shire meeting where you're really stoked because we had 6 people show up. And that 6 people represents the entire sum of the membership of the shire. And so for those of you who are in the small shires, I really encourage you to try to serve, because your viewpoint of what it's like to have a 3-hour drive to the next shire, not to the next event, but just to the next shire, that's a view that the kingdom needs and needs to be reminded of sometimes. As Kingdom Seneschal, I saw some of the same problems in shires literally at polar ends of the kingdom. And a lot of those problems came about from the fact that the shires were a long ways away physically. And to be quite honest, they didn't necessarily get a lot of cross-pollination. It's encouraging when you go to some place and you figure out, oh, your nerd is just like my nerd.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But when you're in a small shire and you're kind of all looking at each other like members of the Donner Party on a Friday night, it's easy for problems to develop. And so it's good to get out. It's good to travel. I've told people, if you make it to Pier from the west, I'll let you piggyback with me from there on out. But
that brings up a point, actually. Yeah. So, I mean, as someone out in some of the outlying shires, how do you bridge that distance between, I don't think I know what I'm doing because I'm just this little person way out here and I'm going to be a kingdom officer? I mean, how do you bridge that? That's a pretty big leap. So what would you say to somebody wanting to take that leap? What advice do you have?
First be the local officer, then volunteer to help at the regional level. We try to replace officers every 2 years. So depending on what you do, there's oftentimes an opening. Now, regional officers can serve for more than 2 years, but we try to have that rotation just to give people the experience. So really it's local, learn the ropes there, regional, because that gives you exposure to the shires in your region. And then from there is the step up to kingdom.
Okay. All right. Well, hopefully some of those people heard this and will be.
And I know it's easy to fall into the trap of thinking, I'm nobody from nowhere.
Oh yeah.
And to be honest, you might run into people. I know for the most part, 99.9% of all SCA people are completely rational and level-headed. But you might run into the odd person who, and I do say awesome. Odd person, who might just look down their nose because you're from the backside of beyond. And sometimes you have a little bit of a thick skin and say, bless your heart, I'm going to do it anyways.
To be fair, that goes both ways. It does. And I mean, there's some people looking down their noses in the outlying areas at the people who don't travel to those outlying areas. And there's people who look down their noses at people who don't travel to the busy areas. And I think the only thing that's going to bring those people together is what you're suggesting. So
true confession time.
Yeah.
I might have been known sometimes at Western events when people from Nordskogen or Wisconsin would come and say, oh, no, I'm sorry, the other way around. When I would go to Boar's Head, which is 12 hours from my house, or a couple times Border Skirmish, I would say things like, it's so nice to come to events in Wisconsin. You get to see people you see nowhere else. That said, there's plenty of people out west who don't travel either.
Right. Yes. And honestly, there are plenty of people in kind of all areas of the kingdom who travel a lot.
Oh yeah.
There are people, as the older I've gotten, the more I've realized just how many miles some people from Wisconsin have put on their cars.
Absolutely.
I was well aware of how many miles people in South Dakota were putting on their cars, but moving to Wisconsin, having lived in both places, it's been impressive.
The one thing I wish I had done is when I was Chamberlain and had the ear of their majesties was to have a special award of the Iron Butt created for Mistress Orla. Because at the time she was still living out in Rapid City, and wow, did she travel to get stuff.
Yeah,
so I still wish I had gotten that done. So Mistress Orla, if you happen to watch this, in my heart, you will always have the award of the Iron Butt for all.
I'm sure she's just thrilled to hear that.
I'm sure she's just, her heart's aflutter over that.
Oh man. Okay, well, so the Moneyers Guild.
Yes.
You were instrumental in creating that, going back to the service. What is it?
Really, the origins of that were, because it was created before I came along.
Oh, okay.
And that's actually how I ended up in the SA. So the origin of the Moneyers Guild, Master Bart, a man named Andronicus, and kind of the guy who got me in the SA, a guy named Ellie Martell. Those three, I mean, this is how things sometimes work. All three of them independently were interested in learning how to make coin dies. None of the three, they might have known each other, but they didn't know the others were interested. They heard about a Moneyers Guild or a Moneyers training session in Colorado Springs. They all three traveled to the event unbeknownst to the others and showed up. They're all like, "You're from Northshield."
Wow.
"Oh, you're from Northshield." "Oh, yeah, you're from Northshield." So that was in 2005 or 6. And that was the origins of the guild. Andronicus, Ellie Martell, and Master Bart. And it was this Ellie Martell that I met through coin collecting here in Pierre. And I had actually been trying to make coin dies, Roman coin dies, because I was doing presentations to the 4th grade classes when they were covering Roman history. And so Ellie Martell knew I was interested in this. He took me to meet this guy named Bart, who lived someplace called Fairmont, Minnesota. And went to meet Bart at his palatial housing at Apocalypse Acres. And I remember Bart said, "Well, you make Roman coin dies. How do you do it?" And I said, "Oh, badly for the most part." And, you know, it's funny, I've told Bart this story is, I mean, here was a guy who had the same interests as me, same hobbies. He had some of the same science fiction books on his shelves that I had on my shelf. Matter of fact, one time coming back from an event, we were talking about a book that we had read as like middle schoolers way too many years ago. We got back to his place. He said, "This book," and he pulled it off his shelf. So I headed off with Bart right away. And that's really how I got involved in the Moneyers Guild.
That's cool.
And certainly far and away, Bart is a much better die cutter than me. But, you know, I've been there, a supporter. You know, when we're doing the strikes at midnight because the next day is coronation and we have to hand out coins to the royals, or been there between morning court and afternoon court striking coins to hand to the royals. Actually, the first time I ever met you, it involved coining.
Yep.
And I still remember your reaction. For those, I have to tell the story because I find it humorous. You might not. You're watching us hammer coins, and you know, you think you had hit a few, and I was holding the dies. And if you haven't seen us Moneyers do this, one person holds the dies with their hand, the other person takes an 8-pound sledgehammer and hits the top die.
It's crazy.
And I said, "Do you want to hold the die?" And you went, "I'm a musician."
I totally remember that. I was horrified.
I think I have the video. We have a video someplace of you swinging the dies, but yeah.
Oh, I had no problem swinging the hammer.
Oh yeah, swinging the hammer, not the die.
Oh man.
And you know, for me, that's part of it again, because I mean, here I'd been in the SCA my first event was 2007 at the Crown Tournament where Hagen won for Ellis. I think my next event was Mad Dogs and Englishmen, held in Border Downs at Polar Bear Forge, the home of Jamie the Blacksmith.
Oh yeah, he's cool. Yeah.
And we struck coins for Hagen and Ellis, and they were there. So I got to chat with the royalty some. And then I think I was allowed to actually present the coins to them at their coronation. So early on, I got a chance to meet royals and kind of get over some of that peer fear kind of stuff.
Yeah, that's cool. Yeah, I remember meeting you too, and I remember thinking, okay, those folks out on the fighting, well, it was a indoor event, but the people on the list fighting, I thought, they're pretty tough, they're pretty courageous, but these two guys out here in the entryway holding the die for each other. These are the guys no one wants to mess with.
One of my favorite coining stories, and I guess it's a kind of a snarky story, but Ellie Martell and I are at Crown tournament held at the old Armory in Leeds. And I think Norregard was hosting it.
Mm-hmm.
And we're striking site tokens. And we already have a bunch of them already. Maybe we're making more. And this guy comes up, and I've been involved now for like a year. I don't know. He says, I just want to thank you, real serious, really handsome striker. I just want to thank you for what this adds so much to the event. I said, well, thank you. But really, you need to thank Ellie here. He's the one really doing a lot more than me. And the guy kind of goes, oh, thank you. I'm like, what is his problem?
Huh.
So he walks away. Ellie tells me, yeah, that's my ex-brother-in-law.
Oh.
So he was totally going to ignore Elia. As if he didn't exist, but I forced him to have to acknowledge and shake Elia's hand.
That's kind of funny. Yeah.
It was, yeah. Like snarky, but it was fun.
Wow.
But yes, the Moneyers Guild, and it's been fun because it's through that. I mean, I got, made connections with people, and, people are always kind of wandering up. What are you doing? What do you, what's going on? How do you do this? And so for me, it provided an easy way of entry because I'm something of an introvert, actually. Once I get to know you, I'm fine. But that initial hurdle, and that provided the icebreaker in a lot of cases.
Yeah, I can totally relate to that. I am too. I'm actually very shy, which some people would completely laugh at that idea, but I am. And yeah, in the mundane world, I've actually hid behind my guitar a lot, so I understand. Yeah. So I'm gonna get the crystals again and see how we're doing for time here. All right, looks like we're doing all right. So you're a Laurel. Can you tell us about your artistic journey up to becoming a Laurel and during being a Laurel? I mean, obviously you've been working with the Moneyers Guild, but
yeah.
Do you have any other tricks you do?
No, I'm kind of a one-trick pony. I do pewter. I do teach pewter classes.
Yes, you teach pewter classes a lot. It's huge.
Actually, and you once gave me a great affirmation because it was one of I hadn't done the classes very much at this point, and it was at a 12th night or maybe a crown tournament. It was in Nordskogen in Lord of Life Church, and you come, and I didn't even really know you at the time, but you made a mold and you cast something and you popped it open, and you're like, Shava, I poured metal and did this thing, and I made a thing. And your excitement was a tremendous validation to me.
That's cool.
And it really said, okay, I need to keep doing this.
I was absolutely thrilled. Yes.
Yeah. And you're the first, well, I don't think you're even the first, but you're one of many people. And to give people that chance to have that fun is why I enjoy teaching.
Shava's always a fantastic recipient for my exuberance too.
Yes.
This is not I'm not the one being interviewed, but I just do want to take this moment to say that Shava has put up with incredible amounts of exuberance from me, and I do appreciate it.
That's good.
But please continue.
Yeah. I'll be honest, my artistic journey to be a Laurel, it wasn't even quite yes, it's one of those things that aspire to, and to be quite blunt, this is a little of a side here, I think people should aspire to be a Laurel the way they aspire to be a knight or Master of Defense. I think it's 100% legit. Sometimes in the artistic or in service circles, people get this weird idea you shouldn't aspire to it, and I'm like, no. That's a whole nother story though. But So for me, it was really just about kind of plugging away. My parents are both teachers growing up, and I guess it was in the wind or something, or in the water I drank. I've
I
always
didn't know
enjoyed.
that.
Yeah, they
Huh.
both taught high school, junior high biology, earth sciences.
Cool.
Yeah. So really early on, it was very easy for me to start not just making a die, but then at events to explain to people the process, teach classes, those kinds of things. In fact, I was teaching a ring making class when I was ruthlessly ambushed by Master Bart and Master Darian and put on vigil by Their Majesties Siegfried and Elizabeth. But so I guess, it's hard. It was a journey, but at the same token, it was just really me doing what I wanted to do. And I'll be blunt. I think part of it is, number one, in Master Darian and Master Bart, I had spokespeople on my behalf in the Laurel meetings. And I think the other thing was I was very visible. I was given a saltire pretty early in my career. I mean, I think I'd only been in the SCA 7 years when I became a Laurel. And I think some of it's just the visibility of what I do. My fear is there's someone burrowing away in obscurity who's doing this awesome work, but because of life doesn't have the ability to travel much, and we're overlooking them. And partly I realize that's just the way of the world, but I want to be better at trying to find people at what they're doing and let others know, hey, look at this cool stuff someone's doing. So that's kind of as much as anything, I think my journey to a Laurel had to do with the fact I was a teacher and devoured a lot of knowledge about money and was able to reproduce that in others, either teaching it, die making, but not just the mechanics of die making, but the whole what money meant in the medieval world kind of thing.
Yeah. You said something that our wise King Ciaran, actually, that's something very close to his heart. I'm sad that we have been in, I'm sad that we've been in a pandemic for 1,000 reasons. But
yeah.
The plague, I think, really curbed his dream for one of the things that he had talked about, being king. And I if I'm wrong, may he come down on me with the lightning of Zeus, but I'm pretty sure I'm right about this. I think you share that view where, he wanted to kind of look into the far corners of the kingdom and find the people that were doing really awesome work who weren't, so well known, and bring that to the light and show everybody, hey, look, here's all the great art and wonderful things people are doing in the kingdom. Were you able to see some of that when you were Seneschal? Kingdom Seneschal?
Not so much the art. My last Boar's Head and my last 12th night, I think I was in meetings when I wasn't in court.
So, sure, yeah.
It's been a dream of mine for a while, and then being Chamberlain kind of sidetracked it, and Kingdom Seneschal, and then pandemic even more. I'd like to create something I call a Peerapalooza, kind of like Lollapalooza, but for peers. Where we pick a shire that either is having an event, a small shire, a Darkstone, a Vilkel Uvis, Midwind, Norregard, Shattentor. I know there's a lot of small ones in Wisconsin I'm missing. And get a group of peers to come and teach whatever it is that we're peerage in. Knights, Masters of Defense, Laurels, Pelicans, and not limited just to peers, but basically come and, because again, what I see in so many of the small shires tend to be in rural areas tend not to have as much money. which means it's harder to travel.
Mm-hmm.
It's not 100% true, but it's true enough that I think it's a thing.
Mm-hmm.
So if they can't, because of life, really can't come to a lot of big kingdom stuff, let's bring the kingdom to them. Let's go and let people have a chance. One of the things I did when I was first to Laurel is for several of the local events in South Dakota, I sponsored the Kingdom A&S, or sponsored A&S competitions based on the Kingdom A&S competition rules, so people could get a chance to see how it would work. And we would sit down very low key in the judging and just talk about how it would work. I talked about using my Laurel powers for good and spraying some Laurel pixie dust on people, and usually they had violent reactions and there was tears and snot. But anyway, I would like to see that for those of us who have the ability to travel. I'd like to see us go do that. For one thing, a lot of times in a small, like in Cauldron Hail, we have our Provost Challenge, which is basically usually our only event. If I think the most we've ever had it is 60 people.
That's a fantastic event, by the way. I love it.
Well, thank you. And we're hoping to have it in September. It's already designed as an outdoor event, and we're going to be updating the Kingdom calendar. But for a lot of small groups, having 30 or 40 people at an event's a really big deal. So if we brought in an extra 15 or 20 people, good shot in the arm for their finances, and just to have a chance that next time they make it out to a 12th night where there's 500 people, or a Boar's Head where there's 600 people, that they don't feel like a proverbial drop in the bucket, but there's a peer that says, "Oh, hey, good to see you again. Let me introduce you to so-and-so." Or, "I know Tom over here. He's also interested in making medieval macrame," or whatever, or bead making. And anyways, that's kind of my dream. Thwarted by being seneschal, thwarted by being pandemic. So hopefully now that we're coming out of it, can really start doing some of those things.
Yeah, I think, if I can say as much, I think it would have to be something that was regular. I think that repetition is necessary, because sometimes these things happen once and they don't happen again, and then people move, things happen, and the connections are, you have to maintain connections sometimes.
Yeah,
but I really like the idea.
And hopefully it can generate. Ideally, what we would have is a group in each region that are doing that on a pretty regular basis.
Mm-hmm.
God, I remember Provost. We'd get, I always call him Toki. I think he actually goes by Otis now. He would drive out from La Crosse. We had a guy from Windhaven would come out to fight in Provost. And, I got to know them. And so when I would go to events out there, I'm like, "Oh, hey, good to see you again."
Yeah.
But ideally, it's more sustainable if we could get people in each region that could do that. Because realistically, I'm probably going to do, as we get started back up, I hope to do one event a month where I travel. And, we'll just have to see how it goes. But, in the summertime, you could go to an event about every weekend.
Mm-hmm.
I do have a mundane life, and I have a wife, even more importantly, who would like to see me more than one weekend a month. But so I totally agree with you. It'd be nice to have a sustainable thing. And in Western South Dakota, we got that a little bit. I mean, people from Shattentor and Cauldron Hail go to No Regards events. People from No Regard go to Shattentor and Cauldron. And so we have some of that cross-pollination just of Shire members. But it'd be nice to be able to step it up a bit and just give people a chance to be on stage, as it were. I mean, like I said, I think part of why I became a Laurel as quickly as I did is every 6 months, you'd see me up there with the moneyers, kneeling in front of the throne, giving them money, or at least coins. And so because of that, when my name came up in meetings, it wasn't who. It was like, "Oh, yeah,
Mm-hmm.
Now it's the guy in the pink tunic. Before it was the guy with the money, but
Huh. Well, and so you brought up a couple of things. This is not one of the questions that I said I was going to ask you, but it's kind of come up in my mind as we've been talking. And this is a tough one. It really is. And I don't know that there is an answer. I certainly am not trying to put this on you to find the answer. But going back to the idea of people in kind of the hinterlands coming and being a kingdom officer, doesn't that cost a lot of money?
yeah. I mean, the reality is, my wife and I have talked about this. When I got started in the SCA in 2007, our oldest son was out of the house in the Marines. Our middle son was finishing up his sophomore year, about to start his junior year of high school. And our youngest son was, I think, finishing 7th or 8th grade. Anne had a job. I had a good paying job. I had both the time to travel. There was no way 5 years sooner I could have done that, because then it would have been really abandoning Anne to have to deal with the guys. But when I started, they were old enough to be pretty self-sufficient. I mean, we'd feed them. That was about it.
Mm-hmm.
And we had the money. We could afford it. And it was a bit of a stretch sometimes, but we basically could afford it. And I don't know what to do to get around that.
Yeah, I don't either. I mean, like I said, this isn't something that I'm saying you have to solve this for us. I just, we were talking about traveling and talking about, I assumed your reference to your wife wanting to see you has to do with the amount of events that you have gone to in the past. And I mean, I know she's cool with it, but it just brought it up to me like, oh, if you were going to be, especially Kingdom Seneschal, of course, you're going to have to be a lot of places. Yeah. So, I think there are kingdom officer positions that don't involve anywhere near that level of travel, though, aren't there?
Yeah, I mean, you have to come to the Stellari meetings, and there should be at least, if I have to remember the bylaws now, I think 2 in-person Stellari meetings per reign. So that's 4 events right there.
Okay.
Because of the pandemic and just because we got smart, more and more meetings are being done by Zoom. So now the Stellari tends to meet once a month by Zoom, if they're not having an in-person meeting. It makes the in-person meetings a lot easier, because I remember having meetings that went 6 or 7 hours because we had so much business to conduct.
Oh, wow. Really?
That might be an exaggeration. I know I can think of one that Petronella and Vlad hosted. That was, I think we started at 10 and finished about 4.
That's a lot of work. I want to just stop right now and thank everybody for their service, because that is, wow. I mean, I don't know. I just got hit with like the magnitude of the amount of work and dedication you'd have to be an officer in the kingdom. So I want to thank all of you.
Thank you.
Ooh, huge.
And so, like I said, having regular Zoom meetings means now that meeting an hour or 2 every month by Zoom means that those personal meetings don't have to be the marathon sessions.
Well, and that actually might open the door, I would think, for people who don't travel as much.
Yeah. That
could be something that could be carried across. Yeah. I mean, I don't know. We're just speculating right now. Nothing official happening here, folks. just
I think if you want to get involved at that level, it might just have to be that, like the old Beatles song, you get by with a little help from your friends.
Mm-hmm.
And you get some friends and say, yep, we're all going to pile in the car and drive like idiots for 12 hours.
Safely.
Yes. Yeah. Safe idiots.
Yes.
And I know Berenice traveled with me sometimes just to support me.
Mm-hmm.
And then she became a kingdom officer. And she's like, oh, what are we doing now? But yeah, I mean, I was intended, even though I knew I was going to be stepping down as Kingdom Seneschal, I was committed to going to events. If she had to go for a Stellari meeting or some other kind of meeting, even if it wasn't an event I was planning on going to, I would go with her to support her. And so I think there has to be, that's another strategy, but yeah. You're right. There's no one answer, unfortunately.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and we're kind of moving away from you as being the center of attention, which is not a good thing. So bringing that back to you, kind of, I would like, as the last question, I would actually like to ask you to serve even more and offer us some wisdom as to maybe how to best handle reopening everything, how we reconnect with each other during the reopening. What wisdom do you have for us as we start coming back to events?
The thought that kind of comes to mind is, I think it's actually a Ben Franklin proverb: make haste slowly. We're all going to be so starved. And to be honest, the pandemic has traumatized us to one degree or the other. The isolation, the aloneness. There's so many of us that, the SCA really is our real world. I just reading the other day about people who, do 2 weeks at Pennsic, and then they talk about spending 50 weeks on a town run before they come home again. Because Pennsic is home.
Mm-hmm.
And for a lot of people, the SCA is really home. It's where people listen to them and their eyes don't glaze over when they talk about the minutia of 12th century footwear, or the fact that the one true century is really the 11th century and not the 14th. Just saying. Saxons rule, all others drool. But I can see that with all the pent-up emotion, you could overwhelm your more introverted friends. I was actually going to, as we got closer, I was going to post something. I was going to make up like a little tag that says Ealdred, because we've all forgotten their SCA name. He, him, hugs equals ask.
That's not a bad idea. Really, that is kind of a fantastic idea. Seriously.
And I think we're going to need that, because some of us are like, I want to rush and hug everyone because I've been starved for touch. And others are going to be like, it's been 13 months since anyone hugged me, and I'm about maybe ready to think about being hugged again.
Yeah.
But the thing I worry about more than anything else is, because we have this pent-up emotion, because we've been so many negative emotions, I won't take to use the word. One of my hidden vices is reading Regency romance novels. And, oh yeah. And so, the heroine sometimes would be overwrought, and be overcome with emotion. And I think we have to watch ourselves that we don't let ourselves get overwrought, that there's such a release, such an emotional, it's like something good happens and you just start crying because you're so overwhelmed with the emotions.
But is that a bad thing? Because I might be one of those people.
No, but at the same token, it's to give people, like I said, I am grasping for words here.
I know, I'm not making this easier. I'm sorry.
Oh, no. It's that what I'm worried is that we could be so much wanting to rush back to normal that if someone seems to be a little hesitant, our eagerness to get them back to normal becomes anger. Like, well, what's wrong with you?
Sure. Yeah.
So I think we need to give each other space, however that's going to look for each other. There's going to be people that are going to kind of like dip their toe in, kind of like, do I really want to get fully back in? I've liked having weekends at home and not having put 20,000 miles on my car in the last year. There's others who are just going to rush full tilt. And so I think we need to be careful that we, get consent from each other, how we react.
Yeah.
So can I hug you? And if they say, no, don't get, well, what's wrong with me?
Mm-hmm.
Or worse yet, go, oh, what's wrong with me?
Yeah. Yeah, that's important.
I don't know how much that makes sense, but that's just kind of what's been kind of swirling around in my dark, scary brain.
Well, and it sounds to me like you're also kind of saying that we need to get to know each other again and ourselves. Is that right? Or
No, that's a very good way of putting it. Exactly. I think we've kind of forgotten. I mean, oftentimes, there's people that I'm good friends with, and I realize I see them once a month at best.
mm-hmm.
Sometimes I see them 3 or 4 times a year.
Mm-hmm.
And now I haven't seen them for a year and a half. I might have forgotten how to really relate with them. So yeah, kind of get to know each other again.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I'm certainly excited to see you and a bunch of other people, and I might be overwrought.
And that's fine. You can come cry on my shoulder. You have permission. You can give me hugs anytime you want. You can cry. You can cheer. You can be exuberant all over me. I'll wear my plastic.
You handled that pretty well too.
Exuberance. Oh, yeah, exuberance on me.
Oh wow.
But no, I'm looking forward to seeing you. I really am looking forward to seeing people again and getting to know them. And and this summer is going to be weird with the current restrictions.
Mm-hmm.
And I get why I get why the board has put them out there. Hopefully the reality on the ground will change relatively quickly so we can loosen up some of those things. I really don't want to do a 12th night outside. I love you folks in Nordskogen, but I'm not doing a 12th night outside if you have your typical weather. Just putting that out there.
Oh man, it's been like 7-10 below on 12th night before. That's not even possible. Yeah.
But yeah, I really am. I'm so much looking forward to people. Looking forward. I kind of have my plans besides the Pirapalooza. One of the things I'm really going to focus on is having essentially a money ears workshop at every event I go to.
Wow.
Oftentimes I go to events, and if I'm not teaching a class, I'm just bouncing around seeing friends. And I think for the sake of my own abilities to learn art and also to build the Money Ears Guild, I'm going to set up, I'm going to have my place. My friends, I hope, will come visit me. But the goal is for that event, it's going to be to have a workshop. I'm really hoping over the next year, get 2 or 3 more people that really are interested in the Money Ears Guild, making dies. And that's just going to take a consistent presence at every place. So for me, even coming back to the SCA, my plans will look different than what they were before the pandemic. Not that I'd be standoffish, but it's like I'm going to focus on this art to increase its viability in the kingdom. If that makes sense. So
yeah.
But yes, just ask if you want to give me a hug. Most likely I'll say yes.
Cool. Good to know. Anything else you'd like to say? This is your chance.
No, I really enjoyed this. I appreciate you doing this. I just look forward to seeing people again and hanging out with friends and, talking nerd and all the wonderful things that go. I've often said the SCA encompasses the entire gamut of humanity in many ways. And I'm looking forward to being part of that event again. So,
yeah. Well, and, I want to thank the King and Queen for doing this and for just leading. To be totally honest, there have been times in the last year where I wish that our real world leadership had been our SCA leadership. They've just done such an amazing job.
They really have.
And this is just one tiny piece of all the work they've done. So your mic, something's up. I can't hear you.
Oh,
there you go.
Okay. That was weird. No, I totally agree with you. Yeah. They've had a rough road, and I hope Kieran will someday fight for crown again and have a regular 6-month long time on the throne, not umpteen months, but they've done a great job, and I'm glad we've had them.
Yeah, her Jeanette too. The leadership we had throughout this entire thing has just been absolutely exceptional. All of Stellari, everything. It's just been, it's kind of blown my mind.
Eleanor has done, my successor, Eleanor has done a good job. And
Yeah.
in many ways, I think she's done a better job than I would have done. So
Yeah.
I'm very thrilled that she's been there. Even more thrilled that I wasn't. To say. Truth in advertising here.
That's funny. Oh, man. Well, I really appreciate you being here. I appreciate you answering all these questions and participating in this.
Thank you very much for doing this.
Yeah. Thank you for being here. And thank you, Northshield, for being awesome.
Yep.
And I
See you
think we're gonna sign off.
Yep.
Shoulder to shoulder to stand as brothers again.